I can still remember the point where they finally decided to send me the link to that Google Drive for this new album, and it almost crashed my computer. I was horrified. I was like, yeah, I'm looking hundreds of fragments and all titled things like just based on whatever conversation was had that day. So, you click on a file that says "you're late," and it was just the most abrasive, harsh noise you've ever heard.
Welcome to the Dreams of Consciousness podcast. If you'd be so kind, would you mind introducing yourself?
Good evening. My name's LF. I am the singer for the Australian band Growth, and we play a pretty angular, progressive death metal style where we started off with one kind of sound, but we're sort of really shifting things with this next album we got coming up.
So I think I know what you mean by angular. I think there's a riffing style that you guys use that's very percussive and uses some unorthodox time signatures. Is that more or less what you mean?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Tristan, the guitarist, writes pretty much all the music, and he's never actually had a lesson. He's just developed this style over many, many years. Yeah, just hammering away at it, quite literally, which is also part of why this album's taken a little bit of time to get out, because he ended up tearing tendons in both elbows.
Oh, Jesus.
From recording hours and hours and hours of material. So we don't do things by halves.
In terms of the term progressive, because in the last few weeks I've interviewed two bands who are also describe themselves as progressive. One literally did a concert with classical musicians where they recorded some Bach pieces.
Right.
And the other one went to music school and writes these like 12-minute, 16-minute compositions. When you describe Growth as progressive, what do you guys mean? What is your approach to progressive?
Well, yeah, I mean, certainly we haven't managed anything quite as lofty as what you mentioned there, but I think it's got a lot to do with everything that we're doing within this band is centered on a theme, and that theme is largely around meaning making and finding a sense of identity after overcoming diagnoses, trauma, etc. And so with the sound, it's very much started in a very sort of dissonant and atonal kind of dark place with our first album, Smothering Arms of Mercy. But through that, we're literally trying to progress more towards more driven, focused tracks. With this current album that we are releasing in March is very much more about that. It's got a lot more of a sense of drive and power. Progressive also in that, like, it goes in a lot of different places. It's definitely not a typical structure or time signatures or any of these things. There's a lot of different things going on all at once, and a lot of different schools of thought and training. My vocal approach, I'm largely influenced by people like J.R. Hayes from Pig Destroyer or Scott Walker, and I just loved seeing how they would apply themselves to their craft and juxtapose what could be really, really like romantic lyrics and very vivid, visceral type of painting that they're making with those, but then deliver them with just either severe hostility or conversely, they're, in Scott Walker's case, he's singing things very sweetly, but the lyrics themselves are about some seriously dark shit.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you met the brothers, Tristan and Nelson?
Yeah.
And what led you guys to put this project together?
Well, I literally met them at the pub, and they told me that they'd heard about the fact that I was free at the time to start on this project with them. And I think we all just like met each other at a very critical juncture where we're all sort of looking for the same thing. Those two had been writing a bit of music. Well, they'd been writing music together forever, but they'd separated their projects for some time. I think Nelson was out in Canada for a bit, doing some more tech death type stuff. And then Tristan was actually in Iceland playing with, I think, Ryan. When they came back to Australia, they really wanted to start writing again. So they did this entire project, a fully completed album. And then I just had to sort of shoehorn myself in there. But what I thought was really cool was that they were just really on board with this idea of, let's try and make a really complete passage with what we're looking to achieve. It's not just a collection of songs. They're all hinged on a theme that kind of acts like just an axis that you can hang the entire back catalogue off. And it tells a story start to finish.
What was it about the music that they wrote that attracted you to the project?
It was so ugly. But, I think you don't really hear things like what they make very often. It takes a very, very particular type of person to be able to write that kind of stuff and to be able to play it too. I mean, now that we've got Ben and Nick on board, they're the only two people that I can imagine in Australia that would be appropriate to play that kind of stuff, because they've got such a strong provenance with their previous projects like Hadal Moore and The Million Dead Birds Laughing and all these like very, very weird, eccentric, brooding, dark things that they were creating. And I think that was part of it. It's all very sharp and dark, but then there's brief glimpses of brightness and melody, and then we were just doing a rug pull and take that away from the listener. There was just something deeply appealing about that.
Some of these songs are quite long. Is it a challenge to find spaces to put your vocals in and to match some of the unorthodox riffing and time signatures that they use?
Yeah, well, certainly with the first one, because that was all completely written by the time I was coming into it. So that one took a fair bit of time. I think it just all takes time, but it's time I'm more than happy to put in. I think we all are. We're happy with taking time. It can be a challenge, but it's also quite inviting because you get to really evaluate the whole thing as a group and realize, like, hey, we don't actually need anything here. We're not just like filling gaps. Yeah, we can focus on if there's going to be nothing vocally for quite some time, or if there's been a topic that's been spoken about enough within the song, we can just leave it, and then the other guys can just get to work.
Do all the songs start with Tristan?
Between Tristan and Nelson, predominantly, yeah. I think Ben and Nick have had quite a hand in writing stuff with this new album, and I'd imagine that they'll be contributing further and further as time goes on into the next. But a lot of this starts from, there were hundreds of fragments that were written between Tristan and Nelson that we all just kind of spent a few years molding together in ways that I guess flowed well and then ways that did not.
You guys arrange songs as a group?
Yeah, it's I guess it's not exactly a jam band type situation. We're not going to get into a room and really just sort of start to nut it out. But it is I guess, a consultatory process. We are
right.
working with one another within that. It's not necessarily just that we've prescribed you these songs, you are going to perform them. And within that too, there can also be like a lot of shifts and changes within how the song goes. I think the release that we've got coming out in March, Under the Under, those songs all changed shapes significant amount of times in the writing process, as any song would tend to do. But some of them, it's just completely Frankenstein out of other things. One song was 3 that we just ripped apart and rebuilt, and so on.
Is there a lot of file sharing going on back and forth?
Yeah. It's all very digital, I guess.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, honestly, that's how most bands, I think, are writing these days. A lot of like Dropbox and like Google Drive, and
Yeah, I can still remember the point where they finally decided to send me the link to that Google Drive for this new album, and it almost crashed my computer. I was horrified. I was like, yeah, I'm looking hundreds of fragments and all titled things like just based on whatever conversation was had that day. So, you click on a file that says "you're late," and it was just the most abrasive, harsh noise you've ever heard.
At what point do the lyrics come in?
I think the lyrics are something that most of it I've been just writing along the way for the last 10 years. I think with this new one, with Under the Under, it was sort of determined that we wanted 6 tracks that could reflect different stages of trauma and grief recovery. And so the lyrics were fine-tuned more towards, certain steps and stages of that process, whether it's like awareness or different forms of introspection, etc. So a lot of the imagery within that was already sort of there, and the vision was already there. It's just about giving some space towards that, and then stretching our legs a little bit too. I think we did a lot more melody with the delivery of the lyrics in this one than last. A lot more experimentation with that in terms of just how many layers are going into the process, and how little we're focusing on. I didn't want any auto-tuning or anything like that, so that we could try and create sounds that had an uncanny valley effect just through performance and layering, maybe a little bit of reverb.
Do you double track your vocals?
Some of them are double, some of them are single. Sometimes there's 8 or 11 layers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think, with a lot of it, I think Tristan wanted a lot of these things double or triple takes just so we could comp certain sections and just focus on, obviously, best performance, but also so he produced and mastered the entire album himself. So it was just giving him enough room to play with so he could focus on trying lots of different things with that production process.
Something
So, as you mentioned, the second Growth album is called Under the Under,
Mm.
and it'll be released on March 27th through Wild Thing Records. We spoke about the writing process, but in terms of the themes and the way it ties into the first album, can you tell me how it continues what you guys started before?
Yeah, well, it ostensibly picks up almost exactly where the last album ended. The first album was very much about, I guess, the downward spiral that's a trope of very familiar within heavy music and art in general, and all the pain and the romance and all that kind of shit within it. But with Under the Under, we're sort of considering that the climb back upwards from being at that point is just a very ugly process and a very painful process, but nonetheless really needs to be done. I think a lot of people I've spoken to about, I guess, the entire idea of an identity and a life that's hinged on either experiencing an event or, in the recovery process from experiencing an event. And with my own experience in life, I sort of found that was more, started to feel a bit more like a cage. I started to ask more questions about, what goes beyond the idea of trauma, post-trauma. What is the stage beyond this that we should be asking ourselves about?
So I started seeing a therapist. I've been seeing a therapist on and off for the last couple of years, and I recognize some of the terminology from counseling when you speak about the themes of this album. I'm curious if you have experience as a counselor, as a therapist, or working as a mental health professional.
Yeah, I think for the last nearly 10 years, I've been working in frontline mental health stuff in varying capacities and roles, predominantly like really intensive support worker type stuff. And yeah, it's a harrowing role and can be very challenging, but I think it's also very, very valuable. And you learn a lot about yourself from it, and mostly that you need to be able to not throw yourself into it too deeply, so to speak. I've seen a lot of people that get into these roles and I guess they get a little bit hung up on this idea that they're saving people or that they're the one to save someone from themselves, etc. And it became a bit of a dangerous, slippery slope because not only are you sort of hinging your own well-being and own worth on someone else's journey, but you're also taking away the autonomy from that person to actually follow it themselves. I do love to see a lot of the new approaches to counselling and mental health work are a lot more about exploring the ways in which we speak to ourselves, less about, right and wrong ways of, and adaptive and maladaptive ways of thinking and all those mechanisms that sort of were a lot more present in the space, even up till 10 years ago.
I'm curious if you'd describe this album as a concept album.
I think we started out saying that this entire body of work was going to be a concept trilogy, I guess, of albums pair within one another. And I sort of, it's a concept not in, I guess, the provision of a full narrative for the listener to follow, but it certainly is focusing on exploring the themes within these stages of recovery, such as, like recognizing that there's a problem and actually putting, words to it and trying to make a meaning of it, being able to, I think, look at, how to integrate a sense of self into your life. I think a lot of this was around, I know there's a really, really great doctor named Judith Herman who did work called Trauma and Recovery. I do consider it a concept album. Also, more just it's part of the whole concept trilogy. The entire idea is that we're not necessarily following a narrative that people can sort of drop in on, but it is following a journey in a very sort of personal way. So yeah, the 6 songs on this album are sort of reflecting, first off, that when you've hit a point below, I guess, the whole rock bottom kind of level, it's almost impossible to perceive anything other than the center of that phase. You're finding yourself sort of buried under reasons why you deserve to be there. But at the same time, you're also noticing that, like, you are in a phase of denial. You're denying that there's more to you than just where you're currently sitting in your life in that situation. But turning around and facing that is often far more terrifying, because you're going from a known state, a known state of being, into, stepping into something you don't, that is completely liminal. It's very in between. It's very not complete, and it doesn't feel safe to be there at all. And I guess that would be sort of considered the first step within recovery. The title track is very much about how comforting it can be to allow yourself to be haunted. It's better to have rattling of chains and howls than silence, type of thing. And if you've experienced a great deal of loss, it's again more comforting to be surrounded by this idea of, by haunting yourself with that grief, by haunting yourself with guilt or shame, it's also giving, I guess, a sense of form to someone or something that's no longer there, and that provides its own comfort too, in its own roundabout way. So I guess without that, the more terrifying questions come forward about, what if all the dignity that we've been given, this sense of suffering, is false? What if we can still live within this space without it taking you out every time you think about it? What would that actually look like, instead of it being a point of, I guess, irony or anything like that? You sort of look at it at a point of curiosity. Like, what if you're more than a collection of stories that keep yourself up at night? So the following song is very much about actually examining step by step, what's actually happened to you, what the actual idea of recovery would look like. It's not about an absence of pain. It's not about an absence of anything, really. If you want an absence of everything, then that's what a corpse does. A lot of recovery is about actually having a sense of meaning in your life. It's about being able to face emotions and memories and then not have them destroy you. Like, wondering what it would be like not to live in fear of your own memories or thoughts.
Fingering the
Was writing the album, was your contributions to the album a form of therapy or catharsis for you?
I guess it's naturally cathartic to start putting words to thoughts and allowing yourself to sort of complete them in that way. But I think it also does tend to bring up more, not negativity per se, but it does make you start to ask more questions about how much, weight and credence you're giving certain experiences, certain emotions. And so, yeah, I would say that there was definitely a fair bit of discovery that happens through that, because you start thinking about, really you're asking yourself, do I really want to be just singing about sad shit? Do I really want to be just, you know, being wounded and expressing pain? Or do I want to sort of consider this a set of experiences to pass through, and to consider yourself almost like a house that a whole bunch of different experiences and people and feelings pass through? And so you certainly find yourself learning as you write. And then you also need to read a lot. If you're writing about stuff like this, you need to do like a lot of reading to see what other people are saying about it too. So then it becomes a very, very curious process.
Did you intend for this album to be a therapeutic or a form of recovery for the listener?
I would love, I guess, if people are listening to it, to, I guess, lean into, yeah, certainly asking themselves some of these questions if they aren't already. I would definitely not say that it supplants actual, therapy. But I do want it to be quite empowering for people to listen to. I don't want it to be, we spend a lot of time focusing on falling down, particularly with heavier music, as I said earlier. But I would love for people to start asking themselves, what would be more powerful? Is it going to involve like that slow work of carrying weight and then learning to put it down?
As you mentioned, Tristan engineered, mixed, and mastered the album.
Yeah.
Does Tristan have his own studio?
He does, yeah. I think it's called Underland Studios. It's in the east of Melbourne in Australia. He's only just got it started fairly recently, but he's already put every inch of his being into it. It was literally being built around us while we recorded this album. So yeah, if you want to check it out, it's a good studio. So
Since you guys had access to the studio whenever you want, were you able to take your time? Was it fairly leisurely? Or did you guys feel like you were under the gun to get it recorded quickly?
we absolutely took our time. I think we were working on it every week for nearly 3 years. We had that liberty. Yeah, I think that was also a bit of a trap in itself, because it meant we had almost too much freedom to move and experiment and paint ourselves deeper and deeper into corners of trying to learn how to play all this stuff live. So I think there were ups and downs with it. But yeah, we really wanted to take our time with this ultimately, because I think it's worth it.
So, as you mentioned, Under the Under is the second part of a planned trilogy. How far have you guys gotten with the third album? Do you guys have any concepts or any fragments being emailed back and forth?
Yeah, like thematically, we're certainly looking at, if we've ridden the roller coaster down and we've ridden it back up to the point where the I guess you'd say the protagonist in the trilogy is feeling quite equipped to, actually get up the next morning and actually not be afraid of being alive. The next album is more about what roles the different parts of the psyche will play. I've been really getting into this school of thought called internal family systems, where a lot of it is about understanding that there are parts of us that we shelter and bury, and parts of us that do the sheltering and parts of us that do the burying. And then there's more, a lot of different aspects of control that we are putting upon ourselves throughout that entire process. So I'd really like to start looking into how those parts actually talk to each other and express it through music. So, you're actually having one song asks a question, the other one answers it, type of thing.
So, Under the Under will be out on March 27th through Wild Thing Records. LF, please tell everyone listening to this or watching it on YouTube how they can get the new album. What's the best way?
Well, I think through the Wild Thing store, we are pretty much everywhere in terms of Instagram. I think I understand there's a Bandcamp. Yeah, we're easy to find. So certainly doing pre-orders now on the website. I'm having a look at it now, and it's all there and ready for people. We'll be putting it out on 12-inch. Got a double 12-inch gatefold coming out that looks very pretty, and I'm quite pleased with that one. But it'll also be CDs, online, all the shit.
I believe there are 2 different vinyl versions, right?
Yeah. So we went all out and went to Dunk Records in Belgium to press them. So 2 very, very fancy looking things. I'm looking forward to seeing them in reality because I haven't had the chance to even see them yet. There might be people that order it that might even see it before me. We'll find out.
Do you guys have any plans for tours or shows or festival appearances after the album is released, like maybe in the summer?
Yeah. Previously, we haven't really been a band that's done very many live shows. And when we have, we've sort of limited it to shorter sets. And that's been something, I guess, people have observed and sort of spoken to us about. And we're like, yeah, fair enough. We'll get out there and we'll start doing some more. So we are playing across Australia with Rivers of Nile and Psychroptic in August. I'm not sure, pretty sure it's every state except for Northern Territory because they just tend to cop it unless you're lucky enough to get out to Blacken Festival or something like that, which is a really cool festival right in the dead centre of Australia. There are some festival appearances that are happening within that too. I think Necrosonic in Brisbane. That's one I can recall at the moment. And yeah, from there we're sort of committing ourselves to actually playing a lot more live, actually getting out there and performing. I think we kind of became a little bit closed off from recognizing, people had come to us after shows and really wanted to speak about the music and express that it was something that was quite meaningful for them. And we're pleasantly surprised with that. So yeah, we're going to try and really reach out a lot more and be in people's faces a bit more.
So you mentioned your Instagram page. Is that the best way to follow the band online and get updates on tours and festival appearances and things like that?
I would say so, yeah. I think we'd probably stretch a bit too thin across too many different things. Otherwise, I have no idea how to run a TikTok, so I'm not going to be doing that one. Showing my age. But yeah, I'd say Instagram is probably the easiest way.
LF, it was really nice speaking with you. Is there anything else you want to say? Anything else you want the listeners to know?
No, it's just I look forward to hearing what people think. I look forward to having some really interesting conversations around the music and people's experiences overall. I do love talking to people. I think that's probably part of why I really enjoyed the shows, even though I tend to spend most of my time silent and being alone. When it's in those contexts, it's been overwhelmingly positive. So I'm hoping to see you people wherever you are, and I'm looking forward to it.
Very cool. Tell Adam from Rivers of the Nile I said hello.
I will do, yeah.
Thanks, LF.
Cheers. There's gonna be an end. Hang on, sorry, there's just a train going on in the background.
No worries. I've all kinds of construction going on behind me right now, so. I mean, you guys are growth noise, right? So I think this is appropriate.
Yeah.